Okay, my friends, we're back with Carmen Tuleta, and we're talking about the emotional waves of the solar plexus, and we're going to dive in and get a little bit down into the nitty gritty, and then also give you some helpful tips. I think this, for me at least, it changed everything for me when I recognized or I realized that I had a wave that I needed to ride. And so, first and foremost, Carmen, thanks for coming back for partying with us and being here.
I am so excited to be here. Anytime. I'm happy to be here.
So I am, if those of you that are watching, this is the first time I'm doing this. We're going to see how it works. I have almost kind of like a little, I don't like the word presentation, but um, that's basically what I guess it is. So we'll talk about, so let's dive in. So you want to kind of drive, Carmen, or you want me to ask some questions, or you kind of, how do you want to do it?
Whenever you like. I am game for anything.
Okay. So, first and foremost, for those of you that may be newer to human design, right? Like there are 9 centers in the body graph, and those obviously come from the chakra system. And a couple of them, what do you want to call it, broke off. So they say, right?
Right.
Like that's like
They
almost like
split
what
up.
they kind of split apart or whatever. What did they say? 1700s or something like that? Is kind of we
Yeah. It's
became a
almost,
seven from a 7 center to a 9 center being.
I like to think of it like the Great Divide, when the dinosaurs when that split happened.
Yeah. So the solar plexus is basically we have seven gates, and or you could have a channel. And I don't and so a channel is comprised of two
Two
gates,
gates.
right?
Yep.
Um, so let's dive in and talk about. I've got the emotional energy chart here, just for those of you that Carmen and I talk a lot about vibration, right? Like everything
Mhm.
that we do, I think we're just all energy. And so having and knowing like where, when I talk about like, what is your baseline energy at emotions, like we're all going to dip into all of these different emotions, right? And when you think about your emotions that you feel on a consistent basis, if you were to name the top 3 emotions, what are those emotions, and then where do they lie on the vibrational scale? And
Mhm.
so for me, I don't know about you, Carmen, you can talk about a little bit for you, but like for me, 4 or 5 years ago, mine was definitely probably like anger, frustration, and what else was I? Probably fear for sure, and just probably a lot of frustration that I was in. What about for you?
I was definitely at the lower end of the spectrum all the time.
Yeah.
Um, Fear and shame
Mm,
were big themes for me. Pridefulness is
yeah.
probably not, I find that in this scale, it's kind of higher vibration, but pride from a disempowered place, probably for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think
so
pride, I think,
definitely.
I think you can, pride you have to be really aware of pride, and you have to be aware of
Hmm.
desire, right? Because pride can
Yeah.
be like, I use pride a lot. Like, I'm so proud of myself, but that comes
Hmm.
from a like, good job. Like you would a toddler, like you're so proud of what you've done, versus what I think you're talking about is pride is like, I'm not going to say I'm sorry because I'm not, like
Hmm.
almost that arrogance and ego versus a
Yeah,
heart-based pride. And the same thing goes for desire, right? Like because desire on
absolutely.
here is, vibrationally it's like 125 hertz, but when you think about like we were taught like we want to desire things, but desire comes from a place, from a heart-based place. It comes from that place of like, I want more, I want to expand, I want to have, more in my life, but not from a like, my life is terrible and I hate where I'm at. I think that's what
Hmm.
that desire is, right? Versus we're just soul beings and we want to evolve and we want to grow.
I think there's a flip side to all of these
Yes.
energies, right? All of
Yep.
these emotional energies or feelings or whatever you want to label them as. So definitely, it can
Yeah.
be on either end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the energy
Something I
chart?
wanted to say about the the chart itself,
Yeah.
all of those centers, we all have them. It's
Yes.
just depends on how we experience where our gates and our channels are is how we experience those energies
Yes.
versus Yeah, we all have the same parts, right?
Yes.
We all have bodies, we all have emotions, we all have energy. So we all have the same parts. It's just how we experience it
Yeah.
with what is colored in or defined in our charts.
Okay. So you want to go over emotional waves or talk about that and I'll pipe in?
Sure. So we
Okay.
have three emotional waves, and there is, or sorry, four emotional waves, I guess, and one is the source of all waves. I kind of sometimes the source of all waves, I forget that it's actually a wave because it is probably the most
Even
less
kill.
volatile. I even kill, yeah. I don't want to say volatile because I don't think any of them are volatile if you work with them. So
Yeah.
um, it just depends on where you are in that moment, right?
Yeah. And I've heard, and tell me if you've learned this as well, is like almost like the source wave. They call it the source wave because mm, do the other ones kind of can be encased in that source wave? Like the source wave can kind of
Can feel
actually
all of them, I
mimic
think.
all of those other
Yeah,
ones. Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of like the chameleon wave, right?
Yeah.
It's the mechanical, right? Is it not? It's the mechanical wave.
Yeah, because it comes off of the sacral. So
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I have that wave. We can talk about that here in a second.
I have it too. I'm lucky I have all the waves.
Okay. You don't have 59.6, do you? You can't have 59.6.
I Well, I guess I don't have 59. I do have the 6.
Yeah, you have the 6. Okay. I see what you're saying. So the gates and stuff. That
Hmm.
is
I
something
have the
else
gate.
I want to say too. So
Yes.
even if you don't have the channel, right? Like I have
Hmm.
59.6, but you might just have the 6, you still will experience it like what Carmen's saying. You
Hmm.
still will experience it because you have the gate.
Hmm. And we can get into that a little
Yeah.
bit more later because I'll talk about my experience with that
Okay.
and how I kind of direct people that have more than one wave.
Okay. Anything that you want to say about emotional waves here in terms of um yeah, just
Well,
like
you can see just by this graphic how they kind of move, I guess,
yeah,
in their wave.
yeah,
And it's interesting when you look at someone's chart, like for whoever might be watching this and pulls someone's chart and sees these channels and gates that might be present, you can pick it out
yeah.
pretty easily. I think anyway. But
Once you learn to understand the way that the waves show up,
mhm,
I have been able to see like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
mhm,
Um, and I think like with anyone and anything with human design and just in general, right? Like I always come back to like, how can we have more self-compassion? I'll be the first to
mhm,
say that that doesn't always happen with me sometimes within my family. And also
right.
like when someone is in their wave, how can we be supportive because we
Mhm,
don't have to make it personal about us, like this is something that they are experiencing, they are going through, and if they either don't have the tools or they're you know and we're all just human, right? So like learning that it's not a personal thing, somebody might just be in their wave, and how can we be supportive, and that also doesn't mean we need to be like a doormat either, right?
mhm.
um but a lot of the times from what I've seen, like the wave is or our emotions are never about the other person, it's always within us.
At the end of the day, it's all about awareness, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's about self-awareness. It's about, extending that self-awareness out to people, or not self-awareness, of the awareness to other people to have that compassion at the end of
yeah,
the day. That's actually how I look at human design, to empower us to have that self-acceptance, self-awareness, and through that help other people or understand other people better.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the source of all waves, 59.6.
The channel that connects to the sacral, from the sacral to the solar plexus. So Erin, you have this. So
Yeah,
you probably have more of an understanding of it than I do because it isn't as prominent in my chart because I
yeah,
only have the 6.
yeah,
So talk about it.
yeah. I definitely like this channel. It is definitely all about like creativity, passion, desire. I would even say like and definitely intimacy. And they have said, and when I learned about this, they say, it breaks down the barriers of intimacy. And I have always had a gift of people are able to tell me all of the things about their life in like 5 minutes. There's this one time where Jason and I were at a company party or something, and I was dancing with his or talking to his it was the BMW dealership, and it was the owner of the BMW dealership, and I was talking to him, and he was just divulging all of the things. And I came back home and I said, "Hey, did you know about this and this and this?" And like, "What's this?" He's like, "How did you get all of this information out of him? Like, this guy never talks to anybody. He's met you the first time." And I'm like, "I don't know. I just listen." And now, like, looking back, like, I don't know, like 59.6. It's just also part of me just listening to people. But definitely you can, I feel like when I say intimacy, obviously, right? It doesn't mean sex. It just means like you can get to be really close with someone very quickly and build that trust with someone. And I don't think I've ever had it backfire on me, but sometimes I think some people might not be ready to be, it can be a little bit, what do you call it? Like auric piercing sometimes in a way, like almost like you're just so I can get intimate with anyone very quickly, and sometimes not everyone is able to do that or ready to do that.
Mm. I can attest to what Erin is saying because I feel the same way. Um, I think, Erin, it's a lot of a combination of your 59.6 as well as your generator aura
Yeah.
because you are so warm and enveloping and you're very open.
Yeah.
So, the generator aura is so warm and inviting.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have this 59.6 source wave that just you are very easy to connect to.
Yeah. So out of the waves, like on the previous slide, it talks about, or it shows like how it's a more, when it says stable, like it's not like the other waves are more volatile or whatever, right? It's just, it does have a more progression, I guess.
Mhm.
And it does, I think that it is correct when it says, like it takes others out, outside influences to activate it, because I can be perfectly fine. And my husband comes in and does something, and it's like like the example that I was given when I first learned about this wave was like, you could be in a cornfield by yourself and you could just be enjoying just the beauty and the nature and just thinking like everything is just so amazing, and then the farmer comes along and just decides to mow down the cornfield, and then you're all pissed off. Like, that literally is what happens with this wave, I think, right? It's like, with I could be fine, and then my husband comes in and does something, and I'm like, why the fuck did you just do that? Right? Like, it's that, like, it's almost like an initiation into, right?
Mhm.
Is what it feels like. And so recognizing, here we go back to like what I said in the beginning. It's like, it's not about me, it's not about him, right? And it's like, okay, he didn't do it on purpose. And also, it does kind of like upset the apple cart a little bit, you know?
Right. And there are other areas in your chart that might cause a little bit of that too.
You know, got a lot of individual wave in my chart. So there's that. But so yeah, so just recognizing also too, I think from a decision making standpoint, like if you are defined in your solar plexus, no matter what wave you have, and you might have multiple waves, Carmen can talk about this, but like if you have definition and you have, a wave, how important it is to get to neutral before you make a decision. Like, this was
Mhm.
the aha for me, because you might be a yes for something in the moment, no matter what type you are, right? Like manifestor, projector, generator, whatever. And letting yourself ride that wave to get to a neutral where you don't feel the heightened like elation, and you're not in a low, like making decisions, business decisions, money decisions from that place, like from a place of complete, almost, you'll never be like, you know
100%. 80%.
100%, 80% clarity
Mhm.
is basically, what we'll have, but just that has helped me a ton because in the business world, we still live in this like FOMO scarcity, hurry up, buy now, you know, you get on a call with somebody and they expect you to make a decision or, just a lot of like rushed mentality and half of the population has a wave to ride. And
Mhm.
so I think of this two ways. One of us making a decision if you have an emotional wave and also when you are selling, right? Like you have to think about half of the population does not, or
Mhm.
half of the population has a wave to ride, right? So this like 3-day hurry up buy now, like that isn't enough time for some of us to ride a wave to get to neutral.
Especially when you're first starting out playing with your emotional wave and trying to
Yes.
understand it.
Yeah.
I can honestly, and we can talk about this more in depth when as we go on. We'll get through the waves
Yeah.
and kind of talk about how to work with the waves. But
Anything else
yeah,
here?
I don't think so. But
Okay.
I can say that with having the six, I I don't probably feel it as much as you because I only have the six. Um, but I definitely people can, for lack of a better word, trigger me, but I don't like using that word,
Yeah.
but things can come
Initiate
up.
you. I say it like
Initiate me. Yeah,
initiate, right? Like I
initiate.
think we're
Mhm.
constantly being initiated and just because we are just in everybody's
Mhm.
aura, right? Like we're in somebody else's aura and they're in ours. And so it's just this initiation that we can feel at times. Um, because yeah, we're just
Mhm.
energy and it's just what happens. So
Oh, the fun tribal wave. There's 3740 and 1949. Um, this wave is definitely sensitive and definitely operates through physical touch. It can be dissipated through physical touch.
meaning
Um,
like if you're upset,
yeah,
you can be calmed through physical
yeah.
touch.
And um, it definitely um, does build, and then explodes.
Explodes.
Yeah. Yep. I have this wave, and this is a channel for me. So it's definitely a because this is the solar plexus to the heart, right?
Yeah.
3740. Yeah.
3740 is a
Yep.
solar plexus. Not
Yeah.
yeah, the solar plexus to the heart. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. Yes. And
And the root to the solar plexus.
yes. Yes. So for me, in terms of how I experience it, it definitely builds. I let
Yeah.
stuff pile, 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 and then it's the smallest little thing that is going to tip me over the edge. And it's like, and I'm not proud to say it, it can be almost catastrophic. It
Yeah.
can be like, and I don't say it, I, now that I know how to ride my wave, it has drastically changed a lot of how I move through it. But at one time, it wasn't pretty. Um,
And
because of it, because I let it just fester for so long.
I was gonna say, like, and all of this, right? Like, what we're trying to talk about and teach and to share is from a place of like awareness, right? Like, the
Hmm.
more you understand
Yeah.
how your wave is, the more you can support yourself and you can recognize it, right? Like, so I'm pretty sure, Carmen, that you recognize as you're building, building, building. Like, you kind
Oh,
of see
yes.
yourself now climb up,
Now.
right?
Hmm.
Right,
Hmm.
back then you didn't, but now
No.
you're like, "Oh, I see what's happening," right? And
Hmm.
and so having that awareness and
Hmm.
knowing and also being able to talk to the people that are around you and that you love so that here we go back to
Hmm.
like this isn't about them, right? This is you
Right.
experiencing your emotions and you working through your own emotions.
Yep. One thing I will say is this is what's changed the game for me, kind of like what you said, Erin. Once I understood and had that awareness to see where this was, at one time I had guilt because I thought, oh, now I know. And now if I would have known this sooner, things would be
Mm,
different.
yeah.
But it has allowed me to let that go.
Yeah.
I don't have that guilt because now I have a tool. I have the ability to move through it completely differently than I ever did. So it's much easier to let go of that
Yeah. Anything
and feel
else?
more empowered.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, and I have 49. I don't have 19. But
Mhm,
just recognizing that even though you might not have the channel, if you have the gate, you still experience this. Um, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like when you're in somebody else's aura, but like if Carmen has
mhm,
19, then together we have 19 and 49. And so then now we have the tribal wave together. And so it's just being aware of
mhm.
how much our energy and our like yeah, the waves and navigating them. But the biggest thing I would think, oh, and I didn't say this, is like if you are making decisions, how important it is to kind of like I have to get by myself. I have to get in nature sometimes to kind of just like get out of everybody else's aura to like get to that neutral and feel making sure that it's my energy and not anybody
Mhm.
else's.
It's interesting that you say that because looking back, I did that unknowingly
Mm.
at one time because I just had to remove myself from people because I was overwhelmed
I was gonna
or
say,
what
I
have
wonder if
you.
that's like the projectors. I wonder if that's just like projectors
Maybe,
right there too, right? Like because you're just
maybe
like,
that's very possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on before we go on
I
to
don't think so.
okay. Okay. Individual wave.
The individual wave can be moody,
I got
which is a
39
very
and my child has 55 and
I have 22.
100%. Yeah. And I have family members that have the 2212 and yeah, you just
And it's
sometimes
yeah,
you
and
just
it's
wake up
very
and you're
much
upset.
yeah, and it's very much, you have to be in the mood to do certain things.
Yes.
If you're not in the mood to do something, it ain't happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this also goes back to like having this isn't to say okay, oh, you have this so like as an excuse, and also giving
Mhm.
yourself compassion, right? Like
Yep.
I have tried to force myself to do things when I wasn't in the mood and it never turns out well, right? Versus when I'm feeling it, when I and here we go back to the business world and like goals, and you're
Mhm.
supposed to, you said you were going to do it this day and all of this, but like if you're literally not, I want you to think about if you're literally not in the mood and you're in a lower vibration, does it actually feel good to force yourself? And like, what creativity is going to come from that? Or does it make, when I say sense, what I mean is like, or is it more nourishing to you in your body to just feel what needs to be felt that day or that couple of hours or whatever it might be, and maybe push back, what you said you were going to do, and feel that, and then be in a different mood, and then the creativity and all of that, right? It's almost like, is it going to take us 8 hours to do something if we're not in the mood, or is it going to take us two because we've allowed ourselves the couple of hours to kind of decompress and do what we need to do in order
Mhm.
to get you know in the mood?
I love that you say creativity because the solar plexus is all about creativity as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of artists have this wave, and that's where some of the very, moody kind of paintings and art come from, very likely. So, yeah. And something that I wanted to say too is when you're not in the mood, it all comes back to your strategy and authority again. Check in with yourself,
Yeah.
right? That's still the building block for all the things.
Yeah.
And when you're riding that wave, does this feel good? If you're a generator, do I have that sacral response, right? So that's another way to move through things as well.
Anything else you want to say about the I do want to say just the 2212 goes from your solar plexus up to your throat, and the 3955 goes from your root to your solar plexus. And
Yes,
so, yeah, uh, it's I don't think I have anything else to say about that.
I don't think I do either.
Okay. Um oh, I do being alone, right? When you're like, here we go back to like how we are taught in society, if we are This is probably the very word my parents used to use with me is melancholy.
Mhm,
And it wasn't I used to look at it as a negative connotation versus now understanding is like it's just it's almost like we have developed a culture that you're not allowed to feel anything else but happy, right? And
mhm.
so talking about when Karma was saying I used to feel shame, it's like now that you say that and I think about it and being melancholy, like I think I did used to have some shame around that because it's like, well, I should be happy. Like I remember
You're
when I
made
was
wrong for it, right?
yeah, like I think probably when I started my self development journey, like 5-ish years ago, it's like I should be happy. I have everything that, I've ever wanted or things of that sort versus just being like, and this is the human experience, right? Like we get to experience every single emotion and it's okay. Um,
Mhm,
and if we are continuing to repress it, like I think it almost we can put it against ourselves or like is it called put ourselves against each other when we are thinking we shouldn't be feeling this way, right? Like if you are feeling
mhm,
moody, just feel moody, right? Doesn't mean you get
mhm.
to be an asshole to somebody,
Well,
but
it's
you can
that push-pull, right? It's that fight against yourself
yeah,
because
yeah,
you should
yep.
be doing this when all
Versus
you
yeah, just allowing yourself to be, right? And then it comes and it goes. Also too,
Mhm.
you can play with this, but like sometimes for me, moving my body dissipates this.
Oh, the emotional or the individual wave.
Sometimes,
Really?
yeah, yeah. Like,
Huh.
if I wake up and I'm like just sometimes in a crappy mood, I'll just go walk or move my body, and I'll just see like how am I going to feel after that. And most times, I'm okay.
Hmm. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Um, and I think we maybe have talked about this because I think you've mentioned this to me before about getting up and moving my body when I'm
yeah,
feeling
yeah,
melancholy.
yeah.
Um, One of the things I wanted to mention about the individual wave is even if you're undefined in your solar plexus, if your solar plexus isn't colored in,
Yeah.
you are still going to have this wave. So whether you are an emotional being or not, we're all emotional beings, but if in
By human
traditional
design
human design,
definition of emotional, right?
yeah,
Is that what you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, in traditional human design language,
Yeah.
when you're emotionally defined,
Okay.
but we all have emotions. So and then if you do have any of the gates in the individual circuitry, you're going to have this wave. So
I want to go back because you said, okay, even if you are undefined in your solar plexus, you
if
will
you
have this wave. Are you saying the
yes,
individual wave of the 2212 and the
yep,
3955? Okay.
yes,
Expand a little bit more
individual
on that.
circuitry.
Oh,
So it's
individual
not
circuitry.
necessarily, yeah, it's not necessarily the gates in this channel, but there is an individual wave to all individual circuitry.
Got it. Okay.
So there could be melancholy, and it probably isn't as prominent
Yeah.
versus, I shouldn't say a wave, but you hear according, yeah, I guess it is a wave. You hear according to that wave, right?
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about hearing. So
Oh, I do. Hmm.
that's
I
why I
think,
wanted to mention that because
okay.
you're like, I hear according like to a lot of where your emotions are. I hear it. I
Yeah.
hear you say that a lot.
Yeah. I'm like processing right now and thinking, okay, so on the one hand, like I actually physically hear yes or no when I ask myself things, and it
Hmm.
shows up kind of in my right ear
Hmm.
area.
And
And
it's,
go ahead.
I do as well because
Okay. You had
I
the
have
57,
things.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And gate 57 is what we're talking about. And also, what Carmen is referring to is I have had teachers or mentors who have been in a lower vibration on a consistent basis than I have, and I don't receive their advice.
Mhm. Thank you. That is
That's what you're
a
saying,
really
right?
great, yes, that is I was over explaining, and that is the perfect way to phrase that. Definitely. When
Yeah.
we say we hear according to our wave, it's almost like this might selective hearing.
It is selective hearing, very much so, because and I think W- because if you are at a different vibrational state, and this could
Hmm.
be you are in a lower vibrational state than, you know, your mentor or someone else or a spouse or whatever it might be, or vice versa, then we don't, I mean, think about it. Like the energy isn't matching.
Hmm.
Like that's really what we're talking about, right? Like if someone is on a fear-based, I think about this in the 3D world with finances, right? Like when um I've had some people talk to me about some things and from the 3D world, like bookkeepers and some CPAs, and very much fear based. And I do not agree with that. And so the advice does not connect because where they are and where I am on a vibrational level is not the
Hmm.
same.
Yep. It all
Yeah.
comes back to energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to say what Carmen was talking about when she was talking about whether if you were undefined. So in your solar plexus with the um either you're when you are undefined, you just don't have that access to that energy on a
Right.
consistent basis. It doesn't mean we don't have that. um
Those emotions, like
what's the word?
emotions that we don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
emotions. Yeah.
Like we all have emotions.
Hmm.
Now, whether we're defined or undefined, it's like where is your energy on a consistent basis that you can pull from and draw from, versus if you are undefined in a center, or you don't have a channel, or you don't have a gate. It doesn't mean you won't have the gate or the channel. It just means that you don't have access to that on a consistent
Hmm.
basis. So, okay, let's talk about collective wave.
So this wave is the 3635 and the 4130. Um, this is all about experiences and expectations. And it is definitely about how you enter into things again from a place of joy, or from a place of not just doing the thing for the experience.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when we have expectations and step into something, the rug can feel like we're getting swept out from underneath us.
I think another word you could use that as is expectations or attachment. So
Mm.
think about, how does that feel for you? Does that feel like
Yep,
when we
I
go
really
in with
like that.
a certain expectation, we're attached to the outcome, right?
Yeah,
Versus, and I have gate 30,
and I have 41.
and 100% I used to sometimes still do, right? Like you think like travel was a big one for me. Like I would have this
Mm.
whole thing set up in my mind, and then I would get there and it wasn't like, and it just like complete letdown, disappointment, versus like what Carmen is saying is just going into it for the fun and the joy.
Mhm.
And when I say clean energy, what I mean is like detached, right? Or unattached, of like, I'm just doing it because I want to, and let's just see what
Yep.
happens. And I know it's easier said than done, but like just being aware of like, where am I entering into things because I'm
Mhm.
expecting a certain outcome, whether it's in my business or it's with money or it's with friendships or it's with travel or your spouse or
Mhm.
whatever it is, versus just going into it for the love and the joy, like Carmen's saying.
Mhm. Just because we know our human design doesn't mean and that we experiment doesn't mean that we perfectly ride our emotional wave every time something comes up for us. It's it is a practice, it is an experience. It is That's why it's called an experiment,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and with this collective wave, I like to look at it as an experiment versus like because when we make a hypothesis
Yeah.
and it doesn't happen, there can be some letdown there.
Yeah.
And another thing is to actually feel that disappointment when we do have this expectation. And like you said, we don't want to. We are conditioned to not feel those things because you're not supposed to be sad and you're not supposed to be disappointed. So, I with this wave, I think disappointment is a big theme.
Yeah.
If you enter into something not with your strategy and authority and you aren't at emotional neutral.
Yeah. So the 3635 goes from the solar plexus to the throat, and then the 4130 goes from the root to the solar plexus. And I'm curious, as I'm thinking about this right now, like, this wave experiences high highs and low lows, like how
Mhm,
important it is. Here we go back to what I said at the very beginning of like riding the wave, right? Because I might be on a really high high. Like, how much of that is my gate 30
mhm,
and, of just being like, yes, and like, you're going to conquer the world versus getting to that place of like neutral in your body of like, okay, let's try it out and let's see what happens.
mhm,
Versus making decisions on that high high. Because anytime I've ever made a decision from a high high, I don't like using the word regret, but I wish I would have made a different decision.
mhm. Yeah, I've had a lot of crash and burn happen here.
But this is all amazing, right? Like
It is,
what
it
Carmen was
is.
saying, it's just like it's understanding. And, I don't like using the word mistake because I don't ever think that there are
Mm,
mistakes. I think there are just lessons that we learn. Like we are
mhm,
constantly learning. And so,
mhm,
how can you take every experience, whether air quotes you want to, good or bad it, which I don't believe in that either, but like, how can you take each experience and learn from it and like refine and understand yourself even better and get to know yourself even deeper versus beating yourself up for what occurred
mhm,
instead of like, oh, okay, this is like evidence for me, right? Like, this is evidence that when I do this and when I'm in a high, I'm making this decision from a high. Um, how does it turn out?
mhm. I like to think of this is the last wave, but I like to think of the riding the emotional wave. So I like to think of it as playing hard to get. So for me as a projector, when I'm invited into something or get that invited and you have that sense of recognition, I will honestly say, "Can I get back to you?"
Hmm.
And it almost energetically is like that people on the other end of that invite almost are more magnetized to me than they would be if I would have instantly said yes or no.
Yeah. I think that you were talking about that. Let me think about what I wanted to say. Oh, having boundaries, like something that I have just decided, like I make no
Mhm,
decisions in the moment. If you need a decision right now, then the answer is no. And
mhm.
so just like kind of setting up ground rules for lack of a better word or like
Yep.
what are my absolute like because I think sometimes we can get caught up like if you are on that high, right? Like you can get caught up if someone's asking you to do something and you've been waiting to do something like that, then in the moment you can be like yes, right? Versus like no, I always take a day or two or depending on, like what the not severity of the decision, but just like how intense
Temperature.
yeah, the temperature of the decision, right? And so
Mhm,
I had to set up like I don't make any decisions. I'm not talking about like going out to eat, right? But like if someone's like, "Hey, do you want to do this with me? Like, do you want to collaborate with me?" I'm like,
mhm,
"Give me the info." Typically, my response now is like, "Give me the information, give me more clarity, and I'll,
mhm.
ponder it, and then I'll ask my questions, and then I'll come to a decision." So
Yep.
just kind of recognizing like where where are you still jumping into things and like how can you set up some boundaries for yourself so that you don't get into the like I tell my kid I'm like if you want me to have a friend over, if you want to have a friend over today the answer is no. Like we're going to because it's a
Mhm.
fucking shit show most of the time. It's when 12-year-olds try to plan a play date. So like, like planning stuff.
I like to think of it too from a low place because I know there's been times I have said no from an emotional low,
Mm,
probably because of fear,
okay.
and then looked back and went, damn, I should have
Mm,
said yes.
mm,
Because usually 9 times out of 10, that thing that scares the crap out of me is going to be the thing
for sure.
that catapults me further, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having that time to sit with it and just be is huge.
That's really good, Carmen, because you have to get still and silent to ask yourself,
Mhm,
am I saying no from fear? Like, I
Mhm.
always, like, boil it down to, like, is this fear or is this love, right?
Mhm.
And if you are making a decision if you're saying no from fear, then more often than not, the answer has
Mhm.
got to be yes, right? Like, the
Oh,
only way
yeah.
through fear is to go through it, right?
Right.
Versus, am I saying no because it doesn't feel like a good, I don't know, whatever it
Mhm.
might be, right? Versus,
Mhm.
am I saying no from fear? That's really good.
Mhm. Mhm. As someone who deals with I have a lot of fear stuff come up for myself, and that is definitely one way that I have moved through that, for sure.
That's really good.
For sure. So there are some ways that I have started to play with my emotional wave,
Mhm.
um, and that I've recommended to clients. Um, just because when you're in it, it's harder to sometimes see or be aware that you're in it. It's easier to look back, right? So
Mhm.
something I started doing is using an app to track where
Okay.
my feelings are during things, which has helped. I just started doing it recently. Um, and yeah, it's kind of eye opening.
Do you wanna share the app? Like, is it,
I can.
or we
I
can put it in the
never.
show notes?
We can put it in the show notes. Daily Bean is the one that I've been using.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah, it's just kind of, I can track daily if I want to. Um, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit of an experiment that I'm doing. And there is also some essential oils that you can use as well to help you with that wave as well, to
Do
bring
you wanna
yourself to
share
neutral.
any ones that you like, or
I don't have my notes with me for
okay.
that,
Okay.
but we can put some in the show notes
Okay.
if you like.
Okay.
But yeah, because I find that essential oils will definitely elevate me or
Mm.
bring me down. So
Okay.
definitely, I know we talk a lot about where we are vibrationally, and I find that a lot of times we're way up here when we need to have our feet on the ground,
Yeah.
and I think that is a part of this, right?
Yeah. I do wanna say too, if you have multiple waves, because I have had clients that have the 59.6 and they've had the 37.40. And so questions to kind of, because basically you gotta ride your wave of the 59.6 and then check back in with your heart. Like, is my heart in this? Do I wanna do this? And so sometimes it can feel that what has been described to me as a lot, or like a lot of waiting,
Hmm.
because it's almost like you're riding two waves and then you're checking back in. And also, the feedback that I've gotten is when they do it, here we go back to it, right? Like, our waves are there to, I don't want to say protect us, but like guide us, right? And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
allowing, like, slowing down and not rushing and really
It's all
just,
about timing. It's
yeah.
all about timing. It is taking the time for you to get to that place of, and I think at one time I struggled with not knowing for sure that it was going to be the thing.
Oh, yeah. The ego
It's,
mind is legit.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It
it
still
is.
does that to me, like,
Yeah,
seriously. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For us emotionally defined beings, I think that it is because we don't have that for sure knowing. Like we don't have that whisper for sure in our ear. We don't have that bodily response, but there's still, for me anyway, a bodily feeling
Yeah.
as a
I was gonna
projector.
say,
I still get a light or a heavy feeling if it's right or wrong for me. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to second guess myself because I don't have that inner knowing for sure, for sure.
yeah, I always say, like, human design, use it as a tool, and there are lots of things
Yes.
that I'm like, you know what, like, they talk about how, like,
Hmm.
sacral beings are the ones that, like, feel the pull or push body response. I'm like, everybody has it. Everybody
Everybody
has
has it.
intuition. It's just how
Hmm.
practiced are we at it? How in
Hmm.
tune are we with our bodies? Because like Carmen's saying, like, when I ask her, like, she knows if it feels
Hmm.
heavy or light, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I think the more we practice it, the more we tune in, the better we can get
Hmm.
at recognizing. And
Hmm.
it is truly, I think it's like an addiction, right? Like, we have been so conditioned to be in our heads
Mhm.
versus be in our bodies, that we let our minds drive the show. And so when our bodies give us a different answer than what our minds do, I remember in the beginning, I was like flipping shit because it was like, it doesn't make sense, like, but intuition doesn't make sense. So,
Mm-mm.
yeah,
But we're so conditioned to use our head.
for
Use
sure.
your head, use your head, use your head,
Yeah.
and not your body. But
Yeah. Anything else you want to
mhm.
say?
No, this was so fun.
Okay. If you guys got questions, holler at us, let us know. I have a Buzzsprout is who hosts the podcast. You can like click on the little link there at the very top, and you can just text message if you want to like ask a question or something like that. So how fun is that?
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, um, Carmen, where can people find you, learn more about you, all the things?
I am on Instagram and I have a website. And yeah, I am a human design geek. So I love all things human design, but I hold it as a tool.
Yeah.
It's not the end all be all. It has changed a lot of things for how I move through the world, and
Yeah.
yeah, I love helping people with it. So
Yeah. I'll put all of Carmen's information in the show notes. So okay. Thank you, my friends. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Carmen.
thanks for listening.